For years, the American public has been victimized by the so-called cinematic geniuses, telling us time and again to see inferior movies, leaving us bitter and lost with nowhere to turn. But no more! This travesty of justice cannot and will not continue, because we now have the Cinema Judge!
Hello and welcome to the Cinema Judge. Today, approaching the Cinema Judge, we have Bloodshot. It's a graphic novel. I've never read it, but people I know have said it's great. They love it. They just can't, some people don't necessarily see Vin Diesel playing this role. I don't have any skin in this game, so I don't know. But it's just kind of funny when you really break it down, how many series Vin Diesel is in. I mean, think about that. He has Riddick, the Pitch Black series, Triple X, Guardians of the Galaxy. I mean, he's not the main star of that, but he's still in Guardians of the Galaxy, Fast and the Furious, and now Bloodshot. I mean, this is only the first one, but obviously this could be a giant series. If it's successful, people like it. Obviously it could go on and on. So how many actors can say that? Not a lot. I mean, of course, Harrison Ford and, name a few. But who would ever think that Vin Diesel is part of all these massive, blockbuster, series movies? Anyway, enough of that. But we're going to get right to the interviews right away. So anybody who wants to hear stuff off topic, my thank yous and just insights on other things, that'll be at the end of this episode. So first of all, let's get on with the movie. This is from, Bloodshot. Here's an interview from Vin Diesel talking about when he first got offered the deal and he took his son, to the meeting and they had all the, drawings and stuff like that. So here is Vin Diesel talking about when he first met about the movie.
I went to meet Dave Wilson, the director, at his company, Blur. And I brought my son, who was 8 years old at the time. And after he showed us the whole project, my son turned to me and said, "Daddy, you are Bloodshot."
Up next, we have the director of the film Bloodshot, David Wilson, talking about how he felt when he first pitched the film to Vin Diesel.
I sort of had a very strong idea of who the character was. And I was nervous about pitching it to him because Vin's characters are often strong alpha males who are very confident and are one step ahead of everybody else. And Bloodshot obviously is not that. He's still as physically formidable as some of Vin's other characters, and even more so actually once he's imbued with the sort of abilities that RST gives him. But from an emotional standpoint, he's very vulnerable. Like, he's being manipulated. He doesn't know who he is. He's broken. So, I pitched that is the version of who he is, and he was genuinely excited about being something he hadn't been for a while. So I knew we were off to a good start then, because that was the biggest, I thought, the biggest point about the character that I needed to get across, and he was on board from day one.
Up next, we have the producer of the film Bloodshot talking about why he felt he wanted to have David Wilson direct this film. So here's the producer of the film, Bloodshot.
The challenge of any movie, but especially this type of movie, is to make it feel fresh and different and update it for a new generation and a new audience. And Dave, with his visual effects background and being one of the premier directors of video game trailers, brings the cinematic language of the video game culture, and the opportunity to see him translate that to a long-form narrative is really exciting. The film has a very different visual style and visual look than we've seen in other movies of this type. He's very detail-oriented, and he had this whole approach to the world of what he calls science fact. So he doesn't view it as a science fiction movie, he views it as a movie that takes place in our world today, where everything is pushed just a little bit beyond our reality in terms of abilities, technology, and the world. So he created a very striking visual presentation that incorporated his interest in science, but also with his unique kind of visual perspective coming from the gaming world.
Up next, we have Vin Diesel talking about how he felt they were going to approach this film and how they're going to readdress how they approach superhero films. So here is Vin Diesel.
The idea was to honor the spirit of Valiant comic books. And Valiant comic books was renegade in its day, and it was creating characters, superheroes that were flawed in a more relatable way. So the idea of making Bloodshot, we were trying to make a movie that was, it sounds crazy, but we were literally attempting to create a different spin on the superhero narrative, and really attacking these themes like post-traumatic stress disorder, and imagining how that plays with our concept of a superhero.
Up next, we have co-creator Bob Layton talking about the science behind the original graphic novel.
It came from an article in Scientific American. I've always been a bit of a science geek, and I used to read it regularly to get ideas. That's a lot of the stuff I got for Iron Man came from articles I had read in Scientific American. I was an incredibly geeky kid. I remember reading a story about nanites back when they were still fairly theoretical, and I thought, rather than being bit by a radioactive spider, this kind of makes some good scientific sense. What if you created a modern day Frankenstein, but used nanites to resurrect the fellow instead of, bugaboo science or whatever? So that was the origin where I started working on the character, although he wasn't called Bloodshot at the time. That came up later once Kevin started collaborating with me on it.
Up next, we have Vin Diesel talking a little bit more about his character, Bloodshot.
To explore a character like Bloodshot that has been the victim of his mind being manipulated so deeply, to explore a character that is this killing machine, and to uncover what drives him to be this killing machine. We think of him as this badass soldier that has this unique ability due to the nanites in his blood. But what's fascinating about the character is that he's motivated by something we'd all be motivated by, which is love. And what's tragic about the character is how love is manipulated.
Coming up next, we have the director of the film, Bloodshot, talking about technology.
I think that idea of manipulation through technology is something very sort of pervasive in today's sort of society, and I think from that aspect it is universal in who it appeals to. Sure, we have the action and the drama and everything like that, but the idea of sort of our sort of lives being controlled through technology is very, very relative to what's happening today. I mean, everything from social media to news to, whether you Google the answer to the question or GPS told you where to go, or whether you swipe to left or right on Tinder, technology curates certain parts of our lives for us and presents choices. But the interesting part about those choices were curated from a list of 1,000 or 1,000,000 people, or 7 different routes you could take, and they're sort of distilled down into this is the box for you to choose from today. And that's the part that's fascinating about it. As long as we feel like we have agency in our lives, as long as we feel like we are making a choice, we feel like we're still in control. But the truth is, there are sort of companies beyond us or bodies beyond us that are distilling those choices down, and that's the fascinating part to me. That's why the idea behind the film was the sort of illusion of choice in a sort of technologically driven society. And obviously Ray Garrison's character is the epitome of that. They are, giving him a choice. He thinks he's making a choice in his life, but obviously he's not.
Up next, we have Vin Diesel talking a little bit more about his character.
Playing a character that evokes fear and empathy is something that I felt was fascinating. I feel anyone can identify with feeling manipulated. I feel just, as we watch the news, in our daily lives, there's so many moments in our daily lives that we're feeling force-fed, or we're feeling as though we're being manipulated. And that, I think, creates an interesting character. I was drawn to the idea of playing a character that had superhero-like powers, but also kind of embraces his post-traumatic stress disorder.
Up next, we have Neil Moritz, the producer of this film, talking a little bit more about Vin Diesel.
Vin is so internal. He kind of agonizes kind of over every decision to what makes something great, what makes a character great. And I think that so much of that is inherent in the Bloodshot character. He was able to transfer so much of what makes him such a good actor and such a great action hero and turn that into something that made the Bloodshot character kind of organic to what that character was in the comics, but he was able to expand on that and make it even deeper, more interesting, more fun, more complex.
Up next, we have Bob Layton talking about how relatable Bloodshot is.
I helped create the Tony Stark persona in Iron Man, and it's like I know for me, who he was when he wasn't being Iron Man was more important than when he was out there with the armor and stuff on. Same with Bloodshot in a lot of ways. What makes you relate to him is the things he does that you can relate to as a human being. Because none of us have nanites in us. None of us can relate to, being able to pop bullets back out of our bodies or anything. But we can relate to those moments where we sit back and reflect on our life a little bit and realize just how odd it is.
Up next, we have David Wilson talking about technology.
Dalton's legs, obviously, we're seeing advanced prosthetics already, but I think it's there's a sort of class system that is coming that I don't think we're quite ready for. I think when you can, it won't just end at right now. The limbs are inferior to human abilities, right? But the point where those augmentations are superior to what we are born with, I feel like, and now you can buy strength. And I think more terrifyingly, when you can buy intelligence, what happens to us as a society when we're no longer defined by what we're born with, but what you can afford. I think, and there's even a term for it called transhumanism, where we sort of are able to alter ourselves beyond our sort of the physical state that we're born with. And it's an interesting question that I think is, you've seen it, there are countless science fiction books about it, and even scripts I've read, and I think it's a fascinating aspect to explore. Obviously, we only scraped the surface of it in this film, but I definitely feel like it's an aspect of our society that is sort of inevitable at this point, where we will move beyond our physical and sort of neurological limitations.
Coming up next, we have the woman who plays KT in this film. I'm going to get this name wrong, so don't sue me, don't write in and complain, but I'm going to try my best. She's talking about technology. It's Eiza Gonzalez talking about technology.
The reason I wanted to get involved in the project was because when I met Dave, I was very impressed with his whole preparation of the script. First of all, he was so well informed. I personally am very familiarized and impressed by science. I'm obsessed with neuroscience. So when we met, we really were on the same page about how impressive science has become and how crucial it has become in people's lives and how it can improve people's lives. And with that being said, obviously it involves this sort of world, which is science fiction becoming science fact.
Up next, we have the creators of the graphic novel talking about the longevity of their story.
I would say that 26 years is a long time for the life of a comic book. And I would say the fact that we created characters that were human was a big part of it. They were different. We used nanites, but we had to explain that to a society that had no idea what that word meant, which was microscopic computers, or actually nanoscopic computers inside his blood.
Which everybody knows now. Yeah.
Right. Well, today it's much, at the time it was literally conversations where it's like, is this going to be clear enough for the average reader to understand what we're doing?
Just remember, he was the first of his kind.
Up next, we have Vin Diesel talking a little bit more about who this movie is for.
This is a movie that plays to a wider audience because it does deal with kind of real issues and the idea of the forgotten soldier. I think there's something that we all are invested in. But I think it's dynamic, and I think it's such a clever movie. I remember Guy Pearce saying at one of our cast rehearsals that he was thankful that he had done Memento before doing this movie, because this movie is such a mind twist. And I don't play movies. I don't make a lot of movies that really have that kind of mind twist that a Memento or films of that nature would play. I think people enjoy the movie.
Up next, we have the director of Bloodshot, David Wilson, talking about how he felt when certain actors got attached to the film.
I feel like I may have gotten spoiled on this one. Everyone from Eiza, Gonzalez to Guy Pearce to Sam Heughan to Toby Kebbel. I mean, I even remember just the day John called me and he's like, Toby Kebbel's interested in playing Axe. I'm a massive Toby Kebbel fan, so I was like, there were many wonderful moments of that.
Approaching the bench next, we have Eiza Gonzalez talking about her character KT and how important she is to the whole concept of the movie.
As the story goes by and you start discovering the real kind of in between the lines of the storyline, you understand why she's such a crucial factor in the story for Bloodshot's journey, per se. And meanwhile, you meet her as this ex-Marine soldier. Obviously, she was a well-trained. She served in Serbia, and she lost her lungs, and then meets Harding and saves her, in a sense, by building a rebreather and makes her a superhero, a human superhero, I would say, by helping her breathe. And so you start discovering all her incredible sort of human powers, as I would say, and why she's so helpful and crucial for his story.
Up next, we have Guy Pearce, who plays Dr. Harding. In his next interview, he talks about what his company does.
RST, Rising Spirit Technologies, is the organisation that my character, Dr. Emil Harding, created, and essentially it is just a housing for this incredible technology that he is developing. He has a number of soldiers with him that are part of his kind of team that are all that have been wounded, injured, etc. So Eiza Gonzalez plays KT, who, her character has sort of experienced an injury of her respiratory system. So that's been replaced in her and now functions on a level that is superhuman, etc., etc. So it's really about not accepting the fact that when a soldier is injured and wounded, that's the end of their military career. It is about sort of looking at the idea of, reinvigorating and rebuilding these people.
Up next, we have Guy Pearce talking more about his character.
He's a genius. He clearly is a genius. He's somebody with high intelligence and an amazing sense of innovation and sort of technological prowess, and is obviously driven from an early age after a sort of a medical condition that meant he lost a limb. But he wasn't going to accept that, and he developed for himself a version of a working arm, and clearly that has been a driving force in his life, where I think for a lot of us, we don't tend to accept things about ourselves, and we want to improve ourselves if we can. And I think for Dr. Emil Harding, it's just very extreme. It's extreme, to the point where we then find him in this film, in Bloodshot, where he's brought a man back to life. And not only has he brought him back to life, but he's developed a technology that turns this man now into a superhuman. So I think that just as a starting point would be very appealing to people. The idea that again, we don't have to accept who we are. We can actually be a more superhuman version of ourselves. And that's kind of exciting and it's scary all at the same time.
Up next, we have Kebbel, who plays Martin Axe in Bloodshot. Up in this interview, he talks about how he reacted when he read the script and how much he really wanted to play this character.
Well, how I first got involved in this was through casting. So John Papsadero contacted me and said, I have this incredible thing. I'm working with this great director, this great team. You really got to have a look. I think you'd be really right for one of the roles. And when I read it, I fell in love with Axe. I was like, it's just that guy who has the memory section that I really like. He was like, what? No, you should go for... I said, really? I really love that role. So I was lucky that he's a great casting director and Dave's a great director, and he was like, oh, he'd be perfect for that. So I was very lucky.
Okay, once again, it's another actor. I'm going to butcher his name, so, I'm going to try, but again, I'm going to get it way wrong. He plays the character Jimmy Dalton in this film. He talks about the character and how excited he wants to play this character. Tells us a little bit more about him. But like I said, I'm going to butcher his name, so bear with me. It is Sam Heughan, perhaps? Anyway, so his name is Sam, and he plays Jimmy. Here he is.
I was very excited to be part of this world. VanHook Comics, have sold so many comic books, different series, and yet we haven't seen them ever on camera, really. And it was a great opportunity to play almost a superhero, but obviously these characters aren't superheroes; they're human beings. But for me to be part of that was really exciting. The character Jimmy is. He's a piece of work. Without giving away spoilers, he is a great operator. He's tier 1, ex-Navy SEAL, but he's got a bit of an attitude as well, and it's quite nice to play something completely different.
Up next, we have Eiza Gonzalez, who plays KT in this film Bloodshot. She talks a little bit more about why she likes this film.
That's what I like about this movie. It's just the future. It's just a glimpse of what's going to happen next, Next thing you know, we can regenerate organs. We're already there. I mean, we can already lose a limb and get another one. It's wild. And so it's beautiful to kind of blend these factors into a film, and it's badass on top of it. So I'm excited to see the result. It's going to be an incredibly outrageous, different, groundbreaking movie that people will be able to relate to. And what I like is they're real people.
Up next, we have Lamorne Morris, who plays Wilford Wiggins, talking about the director.
Dave, I saw some of his stuff. And I thought, that looks really cool. Well, just some of his prior work, you know what I mean? Some of his effects work and his trailer stuff that he would put together and make, and it just looked really cool. So I was anxious to see what he would do with something like this.
Up next, we have one of the co-creators of the original graphic novel, Kevin VanHook, talking about how they adapted the story from the book to film. So here is one of the co-creators, Kevin VanHook.
I think the film Bloodshot is going to be a logical extension of what we did in the books and what the various incarnations of Bloodshot has been, which is a strong emphasis on character, strong emphasis on story. You're dealing with a human being that had all these things happen to him. It's not just a glyph. It's not a cipher that you just know because they have superpowers. And I think that's what's going to make it stand out, is the fact that it's also not just a traditional greet, meet, defeat superhero versus a villain story.
We hope you enjoyed our in-depth look at Bloodshot, the recent movie from Vin Diesel. Now, if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, ways to improve the show, please feel free to comment, send me an email. I don't care. It's cinemajudge@hotmail.com. That's cinemajudge@hotmail.com. Because some people like certain things. Should I have more interviews? Should I talk more? Should I talk less? Some people like the intro, some people don't. I don't care whatever people like or don't like. I just want to make it a better show. So if you have any thoughts or input, feel free, send me an email. I don't care. Let me know how I can improve the show. Now, if you want to watch this show instead of just listening to it, I do have it on demand. on those on-demand episodes, you can see B-roll, you can see a lot more scenes. Every podcast has a show, but not every show has a podcast. So there's a lot more shows on demand than I have here. So if you do want to ever watch the show on demand, go to blm.mn, is that /BTV -shows. So it's blm.mn / or is that / you know what I mean, BTV -shows. On that, again, a lot more shows, a lot more footage, B-roll, world premiere footage, everything is on there that you can't have on here. But I just wanted to say a little bit of a shout out to some of the people who do listen to the podcast from Canada, UK, California, Dallas, all over from, Wisconsin, New York, Albuquerque, New Mexico. Thank you for listening. I like all the input, anything you have to say. I really appreciate it. I really want to thank Ashley from Target for listening to the show. I appreciate you in your comments and your input. And I appreciate the guy from Southwest for giving me input and listening and tell me what I can change or don't change. So all that being said, thank you very much for listening and watching. I'm Jeff. Thanks for listening to Cinema Judge.